All right. So Tom was asking me earlier about long-term relationships with the students. I think a lot of it from the relationship that I have with Tom and as well as the other black belts from the academy. I have people that have been training with me for 20 years now, and it's not really something that I do. I think it's a two-way relationship. I think first of all, it's difficult for a jiu-jitsu instructor to have any sort of relationship with someone that's not on the mats. I think the first rule and I don't want to say obligation, but the first thing a student needs to do to be a student is you need to be trained. You need to be actively on the mats. Now that's not to say that I think for us, right, like one of the worst things is when people quit. Like if somebody is no longer coming, because I've never seen someone 6 months later after they quit jiu-jitsu and they're better off. Usually they're a little bit heavier version of themselves, less confident. They think they want to come back, but sometimes they resent. So I think speaking for myself, and I know, I hear Tom talk about it all the time with his guys. We are always so happy when someone who quit comes back. But in order to maintain that long-term relationship, like the type of relationship that I have with Tom and that I have with Master Henzo, and Master Carlos Gracie Jr., even though I don't get to see them very often, is just keeping in touch and just always making sure that you are on the mat and always making sure that you are living and breathing jiu-jitsu. I had one conversation with Master Carlos in the past few years, and he didn't ask me about anything. He didn't really ask me about, have you been competing lately? What titles have you won? How's your school doing? How much money are you making? He asked me number one, how's your health? How are you doing? And then number two is how's your training? Like are you training? And I said yes. And maybe I told him I wasn't training as hard as I should, but that I am on the mats and I love jiu-jitsu as much as ever. But as far as these guys, as far as like the guys who are under my influence, who I feel like even though Tom can more than hold his own in anything, be a school owner or an instructor or as a competitor, I feel they're under my guidance and my responsibility. I feel that in order for us to have a long-term relationship and for them to be successful in that as far as jiu-jitsu instructors is you have to really teach your students how to think. Like you have to really, the guys who are going to be the leaders, they have to understand like what are we looking for when we're looking for more leaders and when we're looking for the other people, and then you have to set the example. And I'll use the example of Gary Tolan and Gordon, who they just competed at the EBI, and then they're not my students. Gary's Tom's student and Gordon is Gary's student. And if you didn't watch the ABI, how the whole thing went down is Gary had a match with Yuri Simons, great jiu-jitsu, ADCC champion, a very close match. Gary ended up losing, and Gordon, who was Gary's student, ended up fighting this guy in the semifinal, and Gordon won. And it didn't surprise me at all that Gordon won. Like even though Yuri is incredible and a lot more experienced, a lot more well-known than Gordon up until that day, to me, what was the most impressive and great thing to watch was how much Gary celebrated his student's victory, even though his student was beating the guy who he had just lost to. Now most people don't think about this. Gordon was making the money that was supposed to be Gary's. Gary was the big name in that tournament. In some ways, Gordon was stealing the spotlight from Gary. So you have to be really, like put your ego on the side as an instructor and see your students and put your students first and see them as more than they see themselves. And I think that Gary did that because he learned that from the way Tom is, and for me, and Tom's seen that from me, and I've seen it from Master Henzo, and Henzo's seen it from Master Carlos Gracie Jr. and his family. So there's no secret, you just have to treat your students as believe in them and really treat them as you like to see them treat their students. There's no real like big tip as far as that.
Yeah, and I think it's important for students to remember. So I usually talk as a school owner, right? But first and foremost, I always say I'm a student. So I've been with Ricardo since I was 19. From I trained for like a few months at another school. I still came to Ricardo as a white belt. I was awarded my blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt through professor. Now I'm a second degree black belt. I'm going to be getting my third degree this year. All right. I think it's important for students to remember that you're not the only student. You know, I've competed many, many times, and in my mind, I'm never like, oh man, Ricardo better be there. Ricardo has to be in my grappling competition. I understand first and foremost, before my competition, his academy has to come first, right? This is his life. This is a way for him to spread jiu-jitsu throughout the world, right? So the academy has to come first. So as a student, I never expected anything. What I expected was when I show up to train, the lights are going to be on, the bats are going to be clean, I'm going to have a teacher to teach me, and if I need something, I could call him and he'll be there, right? But first and foremost, I always took pride in the fact that I had a great place to train with great professors, with great training partners, you know, so I never made it about me. And I think another thing that I think is very important, a lot of people, especially nowadays with social media, I think it's a blessing and it's a curse, right? Because now everybody has a voice, and sometimes people perhaps that shouldn't have a voice just yet have one, right? I get sometimes emails from white belts like, hey, my professor did this, what do you think about that? I'm like, man, talk to your professor, you know? I think what's important to remember is that, you know, for me, it's good to always think in the back of my mind, what would Ricardo think if I did this? You know, what would Ricardo think if I did that? You know, I'm a grown man, I'm gonna be 34 in May, but I still think it's good to have somebody around you that you do have to answer to somehow, you know? So I know if I went and I did something totally crazy, which I never would, right? If I did, I know for sure the next time I walked into Ricardo's academy, it would be a little weird, you know? So I think it's just really good to have somebody, and it, you know, some students, I feel as a student, have to give their instructor a little bit of leeway, you know, to understand like they do have hundreds and hundreds of other students, you know. So as much as I know he cares about me, maybe we won't talk for 3 weeks sometimes. He called me on Sunday, he's like, hey man, I need you to come in Thursday, you know, to do some half guard stuff for Corey Anderson. He's fighting Shogun. I was like, okay. The only thing I asked him, could I do 10:30 instead of 10? That was it, you know. So I think that's just one thing, you know, you have to keep in mind and understand everything is not always going to be perfect, right? I'm sure I've done things over the years to bother him, you know. Listen, this is relationships, this is life, and it's very easy to just pack your bags, take your ball, and go home. But that's not what I feel martial arts is about, you know. So yeah, for sure, it goes both ways. But at the end of the day, understand, try to look for the good in everything rather than point out the bad, you know. So hope you guys enjoyed our little chit chat. We had some hard training this morning. Anything else, Professor?
No,